Wedding Planning Podcast.
Hi, this is Wildly Wed, the Real Wedding Planning Podcast. We're on episode 5, Eat, Drink and Be Married. So we're going to talk about wedding food and drink. I'm Keshira from Keshira Creative Events.
I'm Vicky from Spot On Ceremonies.
And today it's all about being delicious.
Oh, yes.
We're going to talk about wedding, food and drink, what to serve, when to serve it, how you keep your guests fed and watered without blowing your budget.
Yeah, perfect. And as well as all things delicious, we'll also have our supplier top tip from Nettie Brown at All Pause Weddings and some very tasty DIY and sustainability ideas too.
Lovely.
And also, we are going to be teasing, well, I'm teasing it now. Right now I'm teasing it. We have been flirting with some video podcasting, which I believe is called vodding.
Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Although I keep calling it voddy, which is a very different proposition, but maybe quite appropriate for a food and drink episode. But yes, we have. We've turned our hand to vodding. Watch this space, coming soon. Not only are we going to be in your ears, but we're going to be in front of your eyes as well, with some special guests.
Yeah, some really special guests, but I can't get over. I don't think I want to call it vodding. I think it sounds like we're doing something dodgy. I'm not sure I like it. The other thing is we are sponsors of, lo and behold, another wedding fair. So that's super exciting.
It really is.
We'll be talking a lot more about that. It's, lo and behold, another wedding fair is a wedding fair for the visionaries.
It sure is.
So something slightly different where you can come and meet different suppliers, chat to them and feel no pressure to do tradition or... yeah, to do anything. You do what you want.
It's about doing you and doing it with an awful lot of style as well. So, but watch this space or give them a Google, I would say. Have a look at Lo and Behold Another Wedding Fair and find out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So let's talk food, glorious food. Now, this is one of the biggest spends of a wedding, without doubt. And also, I think it's fair to say, one of the most talked about parts of the day. So it's not just about feeding people. It is about setting the tone, setting the vibe. So we're going to break it down and look at your options. Now, this is your area of expertise, really. So let's start with, I suppose, the traditional 3-course meal. Where do we look at first with that?
So I guess it's looking at your priorities. We're back to what we talked about in episode 1, and if you want to go back and have a listen, that is where we suggest you should start your planning, is setting your priorities. Now, if food and drink is a priority, you've probably got a really good idea of what you want that to look like. You know, is it this 3-course sit-down? Is it another style? But 3-course sit-down is a traditional wedding breakfast. And actually, should we talk about the fact that it's called a wedding breakfast?
Yes, because there is a reason behind that.
There is. What is that reason? No, I think it's the first meal you eat after being
a couple.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I think it's one of the things couples say to me quite often is, why are we having breakfast? Yeah. Especially the member of the couple that doesn't know much about weddings, hasn't been to weddings, hasn't got a clue. It's like, oh, so we're going to have breakfast first? I'm like, no.
But you can be forgiven for thinking that. But really, it is just a figure of speech. And as you said, sort of traditionally, it was the wedding breakfast because that was the very first meal that you had once you'd said, I do. So don't get too bogged down in the fact that you can have a fry-up and a mug of Builders.
I mean, you can if you like.
Why not?
But back to that 3-course meal. So that is essentially what a caterer will call a plated sit-down.
Okay.
And generally what you'll get offered for a plated sit-down is what a caterer will call a 1-1-1, which is you will choose 1 starter, 1 main and 1 dessert for your whole wedding party. Obviously, you've got dietary requirements, so that can change slightly. But you may also be offered a 2-2-2.
Oh.
Which is the option of 2 starters, 2 mains, 2 desserts. Something to think about if you're doing a 3-course sit-down. If you've got a 1-1-1, so you as the couple are choosing what everyone has as their starter, what everybody has as their main, and what everybody has as their desserts, then that's quite simple for you to go out and say, this is what you're having, let us know dietary requirements, and things can be altered. If you choose a 2-2-2 or a 3-3-3 or a 4-4-4, which most caterers aren't.
Why would you do that?
Well, what you've then got to do is you've got to get everyone's preferences. Now, if anyone has ever done like a Christmas works party,
forget it, I'm out.
Yeah, you've got to do a pre-order. You've got to get each person in your team at your wedding to decide what they want to eat. You've got to get that selection in. You've got to get that over to the caterers. You've got to do, it's a lot of work.
I'd say only if you're really, really keen on spreadsheets would I go down that route.
And time. Yeah. And also I would then say if you're doing something where there's options, then you should, on their name place settings in each person's place, print what they have chosen.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I can tell you from being in catering, the amount of times you turn up at a table and you go, here's your fish course. And they go, I don't eat fish. You say, it is what you selected. No, it's not. Yeah, okay. So how do we make sure they know what they've selected? Yeah. So when they sit down, they can look and go, yes, I did select the fish. Great, that's what I'm getting. But my biggest kind of tip there is to avoid too much choice.
I'd say so.
But, you know, it is something you can do. And a 1-1-1 for a traditional sit-down meal. 1 starter, 1 main, 1 dessert. Lovely.
With dietary requirements to tweak. But
absolutely. It can look really beautiful. It can be really simple, or it can be really lavish. And there's some amazing caterers that can share with you what their recommended is.
Okay. So that is if we're going the very traditional 3-course meal route. What about, and I know that this is becoming more popular, sharing platters or that sort of family-style dining. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so feasting.
I love a bit of feasting.
Yeah, I think it just sounds great, doesn't it? I'm a massive fan of feasting meals because you're sat at a table at a wedding and oftentimes you don't know anyone else sat at the table. Sometimes you will, but it's a really good way to get people talking. It's also a really nice way for people to be able to choose the bits that they like and the bits they don't like. So what we're talking about with sharing platters or family style, feasting style, is you may have something like charcuterie boards to start.
Nice.
So you put a board down, you've got your meats, your cheeses, your fruits, your nuts, things like that. Everyone just digs in and helps themselves. Now, I know one of the things that couples sometimes say to me is, oh yeah, but what if you've got someone on your table that just takes it all and there's not enough for everyone else? And yeah, it is a risk and there's not really much you can do about that. I guess when you're doing your table plan, you know your guests and you can go, oh yeah, Barry over there loves prosciutto, so we've got to make sure Barry's sat next to a vegetarian. I don't think it's that hard. I don't think there is that much planning, and I don't think you have to worry. I think most people have a bit of social etiquette that they understand that's there for everyone to share. So,
but I suppose actually that's a fair point. And thinking about, you know, I know you're very big on sort of guest experience, and I think that's really valid. People are giving up their day, and of course they want to celebrate with you, but you've got to look after those people, and food is food and drink is a really big part of looking after them. And the last thing you want is for people to be hangry because they've been hanging around waiting for photos or something like that. So I suppose it's about making sure that your food and drink is it kind of keeps coming, or that you cater realistically for your numbers.
Yeah, definitely. And feasting helps with that, because if you've got, say you've got some grandparents who have smaller appetites sat on the table, and then you've got
Barry.
You've got Barry.
I'm worried about Barry.
Oh yeah, you're worried. Don't worry. He's all right. He's a good guy. But say you've got that mixture on one table. Well, with feasting, the grandparents can just take the amount they need, and therefore there's more for the people that want to eat more. Also, like I said before, if there's things people don't like, which is really common, you can't cover anything people don't like with dietaries, but you can with feasting, because they can just pick and choose what they want. So I would say that is my favourite style. And things like desserts, feasting style desserts, having a mini trio.
Oh, now you're talking.
Oh, I know. So everyone gets to taste a little bit of 3 different desserts, or you don't have to sit there.
Do we have to cap it at 3? I mean,
no, having 23
is good.
Lovely. I don't think your chefs will be a fan of that. But also when you look at sharing platters, feasting, when you're looking at mains, you can then have incredible, like, fire-cooked meat. Like, actually having someone there, a bit of theatre, cooking it over the fire.
Nice, yeah.
2 of my weddings last year did that. And it's amazing that you can see the guests turn up and there is a chef out there with an open fire with all this amazing meat hanging down over the fire, smoking it, cooking it, and even the dessert. So they hung pineapples over
wonderful.
the fire. So then you've got charred pineapple on your dessert. Seeing where your food comes from, seeing it be cooked, making it a part of your day is a lovely way of doing it. So, yeah, I'm a big fan.
And then I guess we move on to things like street food trucks and that sort of festival-style setup. That's an option, right?
Absolutely. I mean, anything's an option because it's your wedding, and we'll keep harking back to you can do what you want. But street food trucks is great if you've got a dry hire venue, if you're having a wedding in a field. Mm-hmm. So one of our guests on the video pod actually is Pip from Stone and Skillet. And she talks about the fact that they can just rock up. They don't need water. They don't need electric. They don't need...
self-contained.
It's totally self-contained. But some street food trucks aren't totally self-contained and do need electric, do need things. So you've got to just make sure logistically that it works for your venue, but it might be the best option. Also, you've got to have a think. Do you want all your guests queuing?
Yes, that's true.
To get food? Yep. Is it that you say to your street food people, we want street food, but we're serving, this is what we're serving. So I know lots of caterers like Stone and Skillet who you choose the menu and they serve it.
Oh, okay.
So it's not that you have to go and queue up, but you need to understand what your street food vendor is doing. Also, that is probably the most popular thing for evening food. Pizza van, tacos, something
fish and chips.
Something really simple that comes from a van, comes from a truck. But I would say a DIY field festival style wedding, go for it. But make sure you ask the right questions and make sure there is enough food.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that can be underestimated. I have been to a couple of weddings and I know I'm with Barry, really. But I've been hungry.
Yeah.
And that's rubbish. That really is. You need to make sure that people have enough to eat and to drink, but not too much to drink.
Well, and this is it. It's just trying to think about canapes. We haven't really got to canapes yet, but we will. The earlier in the day you get married, the more food you have to give people.
Yeah.
So when people say, we're going to skip canapes, okay. So does that mean that you're feeding people alcohol for 3 hours?
Before you give them anything
Before you give them anything?
No, on a hot day as well. Oh, no.
So I would definitely say if you're worried about budget, do canapes but not starters.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, or do canapes, starters and mains, but do your cake as dessert.
Yeah.
Cut your cake before you sit down. Then have your cake served as your dessert. There's ways around it, and there's lots of different couples I work with that don't even know that they could do these things, and we start thinking differently. Think outside the box and ask your planners what they've seen. Ask your caterers what they're able to do, because that's really important.
Well, and I suppose actually that's a good note about any caterer that you engage with, is just sort of saying, this is my budget, realistically, so what can I do with it? And they will presumably give you some ideas and will help you to arrive at ways and means that will work for you.
Yeah, definitely. And when you think about budgets with food, you've got to be really conscious. We're all really conscious of the cost of everything and the increased cost in food. So don't be surprised, food is expensive. Also, what's expensive is serving food, because staff are expensive. And a lot of people come to me at a late stage in the day. I've got one actually coming up soon. And they've come to me quite late in the day because they've realised that they had a friend that was going to help them with their food. Lovely. But they'd only ordered half the amount of food for the number of guests that they need, and they didn't have anyone to serve it.
Oh.
So I've had to be really stern with them and say, actually, we need to look at where we can cut the budget somewhere else in the day, because you have to feed your guests. Also, how on earth your guests aren't going to walk into a kitchen and get the food themselves? So you've got to get staff in. So when you're talking to caterers, don't assume that their prices are high because they're ripping you off. Their prices are high because maybe you're choosing lamb instead of chicken.
Yeah.
And maybe you're thinking, I don't need anyone to serve it. Well, who's clearing up then?
Yeah.
Are you having ugly, messy food plates lying around? So you've got to have a real think about that.
So be realistic.
Yes,
okay.
Definitely.
Let's move on now to things like barbecues, picnics, grazing tables. I suppose that's what you'd call an old-fashioned buffet, really. But you know, where does that work? How can that work for you?
It's really similar to your street food trucks. So if you're looking at street food, then you could look at barbecues. It's definitely a more affordable option in most cases. Again, depending on what the meat is, depending on what the sides are, depending how many people. But you can do pretty things with those. You can do a beautiful grazing table, maybe for your evening food.
Yeah.
Or instead of canapes. So one of my couples last year had a bar set up. When they arrived at the marquee, half the bar was their welcome drinks, half the bar was their grazing canapé station. So people could go and help themselves. Again, if people are hungry, they can get straight in there, they can help themselves. They're not doing that meerkat thing, looking around for the nearest waiter or waitress, trying to serve, like, get a smoked salmon crostini or bellini or whatever. But yeah, there's lots of different ways of doing it. But you will probably, with barbecues, with picnics, you might encounter queuing again. Mm-hmm. So it's just thinking about your guest experience and checking if you're happy with that, if you're happy for people to stagger when they get their food, things like that.
Interesting, actually, you were talking about sort of, you know, making sure that people don't have to hang around for sort of 3 hours before they get something to eat or drink. Last year I had a couple, and she was she was an air stewardess, and they knew that there was going to be a gap of about 2.5 hours between the end of the ceremony and when they could sit down to eat. So she got some of those little, you know, like you get on an aeroplane, the little compartment boxes. We had one tiny crust cut off sandwich for each person.
Cute.
A tiny little, I don't know what they were, but they were sort of like a bun of some sort with a little sort of hand wipe thing as well, which people had during the ceremony, along with a little bottle of either fizzy pop or Prosecco with a straw. So everyone had one of those on their seats because their ceremony was quite extensive. They had a couple of live pieces of music being, so it was actually sort of,
it sounds really fun.
It was really great, but it was a really practical way of making sure that those 2.5 hours before everybody sat down to eat, nobody was climbing the walls with hunger or indeed thirst at that point. So it is, I think it does, it comes back to just forward planning, think outside of the box, and of course that is where your planner will help you and hold your hand. My favourite next, I am manifesting this on an epic scale. I really want an afternoon tea or a brunch wedding.
I have an afternoon tea wedding coming up soon.
Can I come as your PA if I'm not working?
Yes.
But yeah, talk to me about this, because it is another option that has really sort of, it seems to me, become much more popular in recent times.
Yeah, I think it is popular. I think, again, you've got to have a real consideration of how much food you're giving people, though, because afternoon tea is not particularly filling.
It's dainty.
It is dainty. You've also got to have a think about the hiring of all your crockery, all your tea sets. The great thing, and you'll love this, is that every table is getting 2 teapots.
I love it.
So they get tea with their meal. But you have got to think about volume and quantity.
Yeah.
And getting that, looking beautiful. It is a really pretty way of doing things. I just would be nervous. You've got to then, with your evening food, think about something a bit more substantial.
Yeah, so your carbohydrates for the evening.
Yeah, canapes, evening food, carbs. You've got to think big, but it's a beautiful way of doing things. I've not had a brunch wedding, so I can't comment on that, but who doesn't love an Eggs Benedict? I mean, I think a chef would maybe cry at the thought of creating a brunch wedding. It's a very hard thing to do en masse. So it's something to speak to your caterers about. If you've got ideas, find the right caterer that's willing to do it.
And maybe be willing to sort of remodel the tradition a little bit. Maybe not the Eggs Benedict. I wouldn't break my heart if there was no Eggs Benedict. I wouldn't give you.
What about pancakes? Do you want pancakes? No. What do you want on brunch?
Bacon sandwich.
Oh, cool. Yeah, who doesn't want a bacon sandwich?
But anyway, those are both options for sure. And then finally, we come to cocktail and canapé receptions only. Is this allowed even?
Yeah, of course. Anything's allowed. Do what you want. Quite common, quite popular now that people will have their ceremony. You go off with your family, with your friends. You have a cocktail, you have a canapé, you have a little bite to eat. And then that's it. That's the end of your day. Or you go with your family, your closest family and friends for a meal.
Perfect.
There's nothing wrong with saying, do you know what? We'd love you to come celebrate our wedding. Here's a cocktail. Here's a canapé.
Bye-bye now.
We're not having an evening. So
and if that's right
fine.
for you, that's absolutely fine. And finally, we're going to touch on this because I think it's a biggie. Cake. Your wedding cake.
Yeah.
Where do we go with that? Now, I did a ceremony a couple of years ago where instead of having a traditional cake, the bride, who was a big baking fan anyway, invited all her guests to bring something to share. They had a bake-off.
I had that at my wedding.
Did you have it at yours as well? Oh, that is gorgeous. But I think that's such a lovely thing to do if you're not wanting to go down a traditional cake route. But if you have your heart set on having that big cake cutting moment, what advice have you got for anyone who is sort of looking for a wedding cake maker, specialist, whatever?
Again, wedding cakes are not cheap.
No.
And they're not cheap because that people put a lot of time and effort and energy
They're
into
works of
them.
art.
They are absolutely stunning. They're beautiful. There's some incredible cake makers around. So if cake is important to you, there's so many different styles, there's so many different flavours, and all good cake makers will send you a sample or let you taste their cake. So make sure you do that because it is a big spend. But yeah, we did a wedding bake-off. It was great. We asked people to make their wackiest, most colourful cakes, and we chose our favourite, and we still did the cake.
Yeah.
So, we had a whole weekend to feed people, and we thought if we get all these cakes and all these different things, people can eat them all weekend long.
Nice. So, I could eat cake all weekend long, not a problem to me.
Lots of ways to do it. Just make sure when you're booking your supply with your caterer that they're happy to cut and serve the cake, and make sure you factor that into your timings.
Okay. And finally, we've touched briefly anyway on dietary requirements, but I guess that's something your caterer will help with, things like allergies, is that?
So important. So super, super important. When you're going out with your invitations, you must request dietary requirements. You need to speak to your caterer, find out how far in advance they need those. Normally it's only a few weeks, so you're not, rushing in the first month of planning to get them. But it might also help you decide what style of food you have. If you know you've got a lot of vegans, for example, then you might go for a vegan meal. If you know you've got a lot of celiacs, you might avoid an afternoon tea.
Fair play.
So you've got to have a real good think about that. And don't ever assume that vegetarian or vegan meals are boring, because a good caterer, a good chef will cook some banging food.
Wildly Wed, the real wedding planning podcast.
So taboos or not taboos, that is the question. We're now talking drinks. Another very important part of your guest experience, your guest comfort. Keshira, talk us through. So you can have an open bar or you can have a pay bar. What do you recommend? Or is there a right or wrong, or can we go our own way?
Well, the first thing there is it depends on your venue.
Okay, fair enough.
When you're going and looking at venues, if it's really important to you how the bar is, then that's something to really factor in when you're speaking to them. Many venues will provide a bar and the bar's part of it, and you have to buy the drinks from them, and you have either a cash bar or an open bar. I'll tell you first what those mean. So an open bar means that everything is free for guests.
And you get the bill.
And you pay the bill. A cash bar doesn't literally... I had a couple ask me the other day, what, so that everyone has to carry cash? No. It's just that it's a traditional term. It means that guests pay for their drinks. And then there's the option of subsidised bars or limited bars. So you could say we provide, and a lot of people do this, we provide all the reception drinks, we provide the wine for the table, but guests start paying for the evening bar.
Yeah.
That's quite common. So firstly, it depends on what your venue offers. Because if your venue says they provide the bar, there isn't normally any wiggle room on that. If you have a dry hire venue and you're able to provide the alcohol yourself, there's a couple of things to think about.
Go on.
If you're able to provide it yourself, you probably will then give it as an open bar, so guests won't pay. That's absolutely fine. You can crack on with that and make sure you've got a team to deliver that.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But if you are providing it yourself, but you want your guests to pay for it, you need to get what's called a TENS. So that's a temporary event notice. Mm-hmm. You must have a licence to sell alcohol.
And where would you get that?
your local authority.
Okay.
So you speak to your local authority. It'd be really good to have someone on side that has a personal licence. So that's an alcohol personal licence. But you speak to your local authority and they'll be able to help you. So, yeah, I think you've got to weigh it up. Another thing I say, if you're having an open bar, if you're buying your own alcohol, the best time and place to do this is Christmas in the supermarkets.
Of course, because you've got all the bog-offs and all of those special deals.
It is so good. So even if you're going to the cash and carry style places, you're not going to get the deals as good as you do in the supermarket at Christmas. So if you've got storage, also do check dates, because if you're buying beer or cider, make sure they stay in date up until your day. But if you've got the place to store it, get in that supermarket at Christmas and get buying.
That's a brilliant little tip.
Now, another thing to consider with drinks is if you're providing your own bar or your venue's not doing it, you need glasses.
Of course.
You would like, if you're hiring things, make sure you can send it back dirty so you don't have to wash it up. And just make sure you've got things like fruit chopped and straws, paper straws, things to garnish your drinks, all of that. And if you've got someone running your bar, they will do that bit for you. They'll tell you how much to buy as well. So I often work with my couples. I've got ones at the moment, they're doing espresso martinis at some point. My team are going to staff the bar, and I will guide them as to how much I want them to buy for that bar.
Uh-huh.
And then my team will serve it.
And I guess it's things like ice as well. If you're getting married in June and you're doing sort of, something that's Pimm's, for instance, you want ice.
So ice, also, where are you storing ice? You've got to make sure you've got a freezer or your fridge trailer. And a lot of the time, actually, just so you know, a fridge trailer is cool enough to keep your ice. If you get it that morning, it will keep it for most of the day in the fridge trailer. Yeah. So if it's kept in a box all together, you should be good.
You heard it here first.
Couple of big eskies don't hurt either. So, you've got that. And then thinking about, non-drinkers.
Big one. Yep.
Yeah, so mocktails. If you're doing, a cocktail arrival or cocktail reception, chuck a mocktail in there. Lots of people drive. Lots of people are thirsty. Make sure you've got water constantly. A big Kilner jar on the bar. Water, nice fruit in it, ribbons of cucumber, some lemon, some limes. Make sure there's water all the time. Make sure there's mocktails or something delicious. And elderflower spritz is the most popular. Really simple to make, really cost effective. People love them. But what's your favourite, Vicky?
Cup of tea.
Cup of tea.
And I know that makes me sound like a right old nana, but I'm not a drinker. And for me, not all the way through the day, but at some stage in the day, I just find that a cup of tea, probably two, because I'm likely to get a cup of saucer, but that for me is really lovely. And I've done a couple of weddings where people have laid on a proper tea station and it has gone down an absolute storm, not just with those people not drinking, but with people who just want to press pause and perhaps they've eaten and they just want a sort of hot drink. Lovely.
Love that. Why not?
If you can chuck in a few biscuits as well, well, winner.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of ways you can do it. And I think then if you think about your budget, and we've talked about whether you buy your own or whether, you may have to pay what is called corkage.
Yes. Now talk me through this, because I don't think everybody really understands corkage. I know I don't. So
corkage is your venue may allow you to bring in some alcohol of your own,
right,
but they may say you have to pay corkage. So that fee is for the venue to essentially open those bottles, serve them, wash the glasses, clear up after you. So what you're paying for is a service on the corkage. Okay. So it is something that is often charged. And oftentimes what you can do is you can actually just buy the alcohol that the venue already offers. It's if you want something specific. So, for example, I've got a couple this year and the groom is from Slovakia. And there's a specific drink that they drink there, and he really wants to have that as part of their wedding. So they're having to pay their venue a corkage fee to bring that specific drink in, because it's not something the venue offers. But also, I think you can have a chat to your venue and see what the best deals are of what they've got. So you don't always need to think and go and get something different.
Okay. So just something to keep in mind. And just, we touched on it, but this ties into food and drink full stop, really. all of those hires, all of that staffing, let's just underline those points again because they're important, aren't they?
Yeah, and again, it depends on what your venue's got, but you may need to look at hiring furniture, your tables, your chairs, a cake table, a gift and card table. You can get different chairs as well. If you don't like the chairs at your venue, hire some different ones in. Crockery, cutlery, linen, everything. And staffing, I can't stress enough. I've said it already. Staff aren't cheap. Staff are really important. And when you're getting quotes from caterers, most caterers are going to be giving you a quote for one member of staff to every 10 guests.
And is that realistic, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think anything less than that means that your service is going to be slow. So if you're trying to barter down and trying to get it under budget, I don't believe staffing is the way to go. But maybe changing the style of service can lower your staffing. If you've got a buffet, you can have less staff.
Fair play.
Things to think about.
All things to think about. And that leads us neatly into this week's supplier top tip, which comes from Nettie Brown at All Paws Weddings. Now, this is dog chaperone. So, Nettie, what have you got for us?
For couples who adore their dogs and can't imagine getting married without them by their side, make sure you have a dog chaperone, as no matter how much your friends and family love your dog, they won't want to care for them on your wedding day. Make sure you're offered a free meet and greet by the chaperone several months before your wedding to see how they interact with your dog and to talk through how your dog's day is going to look, taking into account their age, personality and individual needs. Make sure the chaperone is fully insured for the services they're providing, including all care, transportation and pet sitting. Check out their reviews and see what other couples thought of the services that they received. This should give you peace of mind that while you're celebrating, your dog is going to have their best day too.
Thank you so much, Nettie. That's absolutely wooftastic.
Wooftastic!
Look at me wagging my tail. I'm a good boy. Listen, let's talk now about DIY drink stations because they can be a lot of fun. And we just touched on tea there. I'm all for a tea bar. But things like personalised cocktails and
absolutely.
What else? Where else can we go with this?
I've got a yellow and pink themed wedding this year. They're having a yellow and pink cocktail.
Lovely.
There you go.
And what else? I mean, if it's sort of winter, if we're looking at winter weddings, what can we be looking at there?
Yeah, like a hot chocolate bar, mulled wine bar. There's lots of different things. You just got to make sure logistically they work for your venue. But there's lots of ways to pimp my Prosecco. It's kind of a bit out of fashion now, outdated, but actually some really nice fruity ice cubes or something that you can kind of add a different twist to something.
So just get a bit creative, I guess, with that sort of thing.
Yeah, just make sure, again, you've got someone there to keep it stocked up, keep it clean and tidy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then our sustainability tip. So I really think it's important to opt for local seasonal produce where you can. So your caterer should be able to advise you on that. It not only does it cut down your carbon footprint, but it often tastes so much nicer if you've got locally grown, fresh food. And have a chat to your caterer about food waste. What happens to the food? Make sure you're not over ordering just because you're hungry at the time that you have that meeting.
Yeah.
Can you have leftovers boxed up? Can you donate things afterwards? There's different things to think about, but really think about sustainability when you are booking your meal.
Nice one. Well, I think that probably ties up food and drink quite nicely, doesn't it? So on to next episode. Join us, please, because we're going to be talking about outfits, seating plans and stationery as well.
Yeah, can't wait. And as always, you can find us on Instagram at wildlywedpod, our website wildlywedpod.co.uk, but most importantly, you can listen to us on Spotify or Apple Music. And soon our video pods will be live on YouTube too. So we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Take care.
Say I do to the Wildly Wed podcast. Follow us on Insta at Wildly Wed Pod.